Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our May Learning Lab, where this month we'll be discussing networking for small business. My name is Dave Hyde. I'm the manager of the Small Business Centre for Barrie, Simcoe County and Orillia, and delighted to have you with us today. Our Learning Lab series is presented in partnership with the Barrie Public Library. So joining me today is my good colleague, Modupe Babatunde from the Barrie Public Library, and I'd just like to take a moment to allow her to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Like Dave said, my name is Modupe and I'm from the Barrie Public Library. I will be busy putting links to our feedback form and our physical and online resources for networking in the chat window. Please take a moment to complete our feedback form, as we will always like to know how we are doing and what programs you'd like to see in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Modupe. So folks, we are recording this session, so please be aware that any questions that you ask in the chat function will be recorded as well. And once we finish up today's session, this will be posted on our YouTube channel, along with where you can find all of our other learning labs from the past year, 18 months or so. Before we go any further, I would just like to say a few words about our speaker. So joining us today is Patricia Dent. Patricia is the business mentor and CEO of Ask for Directions Training and Grow Vantage, Inc. As a certified coach, business mentor, and entrepreneur, she has held almost 7,000 training and coaching sessions to allow early stage entrepreneurs to start and grow their business and become profitable sooner. Effective growth is achieved by the combination of just-in-time business coaching, using a strategic and solutions-based approach, a supportive community, and training on practical and up-to-date methods of building a business, which are delivered by entrepreneurial experts. In addition to her entrepreneurial expertise, Patricia also brings over 30 years of experience in corporate organizations, from startups to institutions, in sectors that include financial, health, event marketing, entrepreneurial growth, and professional services. She has extensive experience in communications, marketing, administration, event and facility management with companies that include Bell Mobility, CEO of the Year and Top 40 Under 40 programs, the Toronto Stock Exchange, Ontario Centres of Excellence, and Toronto Rehab Hospital. A past president of the Barrie Chamber of Commerce and former board member of several not-for-profits, Patricia has a BA with honors in sociology from the University of Toronto, marketing certification from Ryerson University, and certifications in CRM, coaching, and event management. She and her husband, Rob, have 2 grown daughters, 2 grandchildren, and a passionate love of animals. Patricia is also a great friend and colleague of mine and the Small Business Centre. So we're always grateful, Patricia, for your willingness to volunteer your time and share your amazing and extensive knowledge with our local entrepreneurs. So once again, thank you, Patricia. Super appreciated. And without further ado, I will hand it over to you to take away today's presentation.
Thanks, Dave. That's very cool. It's hard to listen to all of that, even when you've contributed to it. But this is a passion for me. This isn't just a lifestyle or a business focus. It's a passion. So if you're ready to go, we'll start. And I will put on my timer.
Indeed. So I don't see your presentation on the screen.
I just put it down because I wanted to actually be a person, just so you know.
Very good. Okay.
I thought I'd start out as a person instead of just a PowerPoint, but I'll put it up in 2 seconds. Thanks. Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is, it's an old subject, but it's something like that has to be renewed, just like most things in the pandemic. So, or as a result of the pandemic. So we're going to take a little bit of a new look on networking. So what is it and why should you care, really? It's something that we often think about in terms of in-person events, and they're coming back, which is great, but it's changed like so many other things. And we're going to talk about in-person, online, and a new focus on collaboration that I believe will dominate the landscape in 2022. And it's not new as well, but I think we all need to have a look at what we're doing with with networking. So what is it that, we're going to look at? Here's our agenda. We're going to define it. We're going to understand why it works so well still. We're going to have to do a little prep. And this is a little bit different, but if you don't take the time to prepare the way you're going to network, it's not going to help you as much as it could. There are definitely some pitfalls to avoid. You also need to look at what your goals are, how you're presenting yourself, who your ideal client is, and then we'll get into 6 steps of networking. So how do you manage that networking process, and what do you do to follow up at the end of it? And then at the end, we're going to go to collaboration. So what is it? Well, we know what it is. We think we know what it is. Small business networking is very common in smaller centers of business like Barrie. But when you're looking at an online landscape, you have to take a look at how you're doing this. So it's important that we are looking at networking in order to form relationships. We need to have relationships in business because things go a lot smoother. We can greet our clients and meet our clients much more easily. And we need to understand how those relationships are established. How many of you have walked into a networking situation and there are people out there and all they're doing is giving out their cards? That happened at one of the chamber events I was at a couple of years ago. And I had to kind of tap that person on the shoulder and say, I don't know that people are going to keep your little business card. Business cards are important, but they don't know you. And why would they keep it if they haven't had a conversation and you haven't shown any interest in them except for receiving their business card? So we need to understand how relationships are established. And the problem with the word networking is that it's been used so much, it honestly becomes synonymous with sales. And I'm here to tell you, don't go down that road. Do not make it an easy, quick sales pitch. You're just going to turn people off. So it's a process of building relationships. And while it's not sales, it can result in sales. It's a marketing strategy, and you should be using it almost as your number one marketing strategy. It's something that you'll do whatever's going on in your world and whenever's going on in your world, apart from some of the launch initiatives or the bigger pushes for sales. What it isn't, as I said, is instant sales. Now, you may wonder if it's still confined to local events as it was pre-pandemic. Actually, no. There are both local and online groups and relationships that you can have, and events that are going on, both online, as you know, and in person. And those can be used to network and form relationships. We used to think of it just as a live event phenomenon, but no, it's not. So interestingly, we've adapted to online. We all know this. Businesses had to survive by having a hybrid kind of approach, online and local in many cases. They've become very creative in figuring out how to navigate the situation. So we've adapted. And although you're here to learn about networking, I want you to understand the skills that you've already developed. For example, you have different ideas. You've had to relate to complete strangers over Zoom, and you can learn from each other. So, those wonderful breakout rooms that people get thrown into to meet and greet, that's kind of a shortcut to networking. And that's a great place to remember that you've got these online networking skills. Now, if you're networking, you have a better chance of meeting the right people who could become your clients. And that's one of the reasons that it works so well. So networking events are often structured. So in some cases, such as networking groups, some people form their own. There are BNI groups. There are alternative to BNI groups. And they are structured to provide an exchange of information and to make live connections, whether they're in person or online. So, for example, I connected in an online networking group that I just became aware of, and a person who was in New Zealand, and I had a great chat over Zoom. So I'm now connecting to people in various countries, and that's only good for everybody. Now, why is it important? What happens when you don't know someone? How can you tell if you like them? How can you tell if you trust them? How can you know what to expect? And whether or not they're interested in doing business with you. You can't tell that until you have a relationship. You can't know whether your product or service is going to help them in some way. And let's face it, we want to help people with what we love to do. And if you're not loving what you're doing or you're not liking the people, listen up to the prep part, because you need to have a business that you love to really be part of. So if you don't know anything about those people that you're trying to approach, you're not in a relationship with them, and you need to be in a business relationship. So if you've got those structured events like a BNI meeting, you need to make sure that your presentation, and this is a tiny, tiny presentation, an infomercial is often how it's referred to, is efficient, not really salesy, but focuses on the help that you can give them. So that's part of the prep we'll be doing. And you have to do 3 things from networking. You have to identify your potential clients. You have to identify good places to find those potential clients. You have to figure out if you're going to form a relationship and if there's a good match there, which you won't close in terms of closing the deal right then, but you'll follow up with. And if you can network in the right places and meet the right people, you're going to avoid wasting money, time, and effort. Now, let's just start with the basics. Okay, oops, I have a trigger finger, obviously. Okay, so let's start with the basics. There's 3 things that I want to talk about briefly. One is your goals. One is the problem that you are going to solve for your client. And I don't care what kind of business you're in, that's a fundamental issue. That's the fundamental message that you need to be delivering. So what problem will you solve for your customer, or what desire or want will you fill? Let's face it, I don't think buying shoes solves a problem. Maybe for some women, not for me. But I think that it's a want. I want that. I want to go on a trip. So there are some things that people will want, and there are other things that they will want to avoid. And third, you need to know who your ideal client is. You need to get as close as you can. It's a bit of an iterative process, I can tell you. I've just had a live in my Startup and Grow networking group, and I was talking about the need to continue researching your client. So this is a really, it's an important thing to do. So let's start with your goals. Well, yes, you want business, but do you want followers? Do you want clients? Do you want collaborations? So many of us have depended on social media to really connect with people, particularly in the last 2 years, and that is totally understandable, and I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but those folks are followers. Whether there's a lot of conversion from social media followers to clients really depends on how well you're connecting with your clients. But there's a bit of a distance with social, so followers are great because it will make you feel like you're making headway, you're getting your messaging out, but unless you can convert them, they're followers. Now, clients, that's a great goal to have, not in the first meeting, just saying. And collaborations, we're going to deal with at the end, just briefly. But what is important to you in your business? What is your rationale, your raison d'etre? That's one of the things that's really important to figure out, because it is all about you, believe it or not. If you're not liking your business and you don't feel passion or purpose in what you're bringing to your clients, that's a really critical thing to figure out. Okay, let's look onwards. So what does your product or service do for your ideal client? Either they are going to get something they haven't had before, a problem is going to get resolved, they're getting rid of something that they didn't want to have happen, and usually we think of it in the marketing world as a transformation. In other words, they were this way before, they are this way after. So if you think about your before and after, that's a huge thing to kind of figure out. And it takes longer than you think. It's something that my clients and I wrestle with for a while until we hit on the thing that makes that transformation work. Now, one of the things that we want to do is be able to express it in a simple way. And this is one of the ways that I've used that is fairly simple. So what do you do for your client? Think about, I help, and describe who they are. I help women who are in corporate jobs, as an example. Do what? I help women who are in corporate jobs find the training and help they need to establish a business so that they can have the business of their dreams. They can have the life of their dreams. So in other words, you're going to avoid or you're going to gain something. And it could be, you might have one of my students, Julia Heyman, is a bedorthist. I always have to pause before I say that word. And she does a great job at giving, helping you return that balance. So you want to get rid of pain in your feet and your legs and your knees as a result of the way your body is balanced at the time. So she might give you some orthotics. That's getting rid of a pain. And one of the things that is helpful in this, I put a little note on the bottom here. Look at Google, look at social, look at forums, look at blogs too, although that might be a little bit of a more obtuse way to do it. But when people have a problem, they go to Google, don't they? They go to their friends. They might talk about it on social. They might talk about it in forums. So those are great places to refine your mission for your client and get the language that people are using. So are you selling to individuals? Are you a business to consumer business? Are you selling to other businesses? That's a little more involved because you often have to go through the ranks. But how will you know you're networking with the right clients? And how can you judge a networking venue if you don't know your clients very well? So that's a really critical thing to do as well. So when you fill this in, you're going to know what the ideal client is that you're looking for and where they're likely to hang out. So here's an example of some of the questions you might ask. Do you sell the product to kids? Are you a toy manufacturer? If we use an example, let's say I have beer products. One of my clients makes beer products. Could you sell that product to adults? Yes, you can. What kind of adults? Are there specific people who like beer? Are there others? Does it matter how old they are? Is it something that an older person will want, a younger person, or somewhere in between? Think about these. Does their gender matter? Does their profession matter? Sometimes a profession can matter, for example, if they're making more money than other people. So that if you have a higher priced product, then you can think about who's got enough money that they're bringing into their household in order to buy your product. Does it matter where they live? It might. How about religious beliefs? And this, not necessarily traditional religious, but spirituality. These are ways that you can identify some of the people. Are they going through a life stage? If you say to me, so I use the example women, but that actually wasn't pinpointed enough in my initial description. So if I'm talking about women, am I talking about people who are in their teens? Am I talking about young women? Am I talking about women who have had children? Am I talking about grandmothers or people who are going through later stages of life? What your product and service may do matters. And if I'm preaching to the choir, I'm so glad because this is critical. Now, do they have interests that you can use to locate them? For example, are they part of service clubs? Rotary is huge here, and so is Kiwanis. They have different approaches. Are the kinds of people who are attracted to different service clubs your people? And what about charities? Remember that this is a very giving place that we live in, and we often volunteer our time to help those not-for-profits and charities that just, can't necessarily afford to pay for all the services they need. So the boards of people on charities or service clubs or not-for-profits may be interesting people to target if they fall into your parameters. Do they have pets? That's a personal favorite of mine. One of my clients walks dogs and does it in bush hikes, which is very cool. Another one of my clients brings vet tech services to your home. That is such a cool place. Okay, that's B2C. Almost forgot, and I talked about social. What social media platforms do they hang out? If you try to be on all of them, you'll drive yourself crazy. Just going to check my time here. Okay. What about B2B? And if anybody is out there, doing a B2B sort of job, you're looking at the organization, the rationale of the organization, but you're also looking at individuals. So keep that in mind. Does that business belong to a business association like the Chamber or Sandbox? That could be in person or online. What is their industry sector? Do they belong to associations that you might become a part of? One of my graduates, who's also one of my my expert instructors in photography and videography, just joined an association that really allows him to do some amazing things with their members. What about interest clubs, hobbies, surfing, camping, bird watching? Not those by themselves, but anything like that that has an interest. If you're interested in it, that makes it great for you too. Do they attend social or training events? Do they sponsor specific sports? Sponsors always send people to sports events, just saying. So those are a little bit of a longer road to travel B2B, but you still have to network with those people. So let's start with the 6 steps of networking. And I'm going to go through this because often people are very uncomfortable. So we'll talk about, what if I don't like networking? And if you're secretly sitting back there going, oh yeah, this is great, this is a good reason to do this, but I really just don't want to. Stay patient, we'll be there. But I want you to make a list of the possible groups that match your customers. What are the possible places that your customers are going to hang out, given their interests and their life choices and their state of the nation? So you can do in person, you can do online, but you have to figure out where those things are. Now, if anybody's interested, you could email me. My email is on the slide. There's a couple of things I can help you with. Maybe I didn't have them organized to give you today, but one of them is a list of possible groups. We compiled that in a session one time, and there are lots of them, but you can also look at 211. Speaking of the library, the Barrie Library, there are resources there that can absolutely help you in your quest to find your ideal client and also to find businesses and organizations where they might be contributing. So this is just the reason it's small, is that there's lots of them. And yes, you can look at them. So for example, let me just pick a couple. CARP. Who knows about CARP? It's the Canadian Association of Retired Persons. If your target market is seniors and you perhaps provide PSW services, or you want to target seniors because they're downsizing and you're in real estate, think about the things that you need to talk to these people about and look at the groups that they may hang out in. Now, CARP has both the Zoomers, I think that's the right name, although I think it might have changed after the advent of Zoom, the people who are the kids of the seniors. So they might be two. There might be seniors who are there and there might be their kids. Question, who pays the bills? Who's the influencer you really need to talk to? Is it the senior themselves? And they may be determined to be that person no matter what happens, even dementia. And my mother had dementia, so I kind of know this one. But they also may just say, hey, you take care of it. I'm not sure I'm doing a great job. So it may be their kids who are looking out for their future, who are trying to find resources for them. So that's just one example. Could be community groups, it could be churches. Curling, for example. There are people who are mad about curling. There are women who are moms and they join mom groups. And there are different mom groups that happen all the time. So have a look. And I have put in the bottom there, other 211 at the Barrie Library. It's a great resource. So have a look at where you can do that. Now, let's talk about your technique. As I said, not sales, not a card distribution methodology. So what is the best way to handle this if you really don't want to? Last year for the Chamber, one of my colleagues in the United States who deals with internet or introverted marketing and myself put on a webinar about how to network if you're introverted. So if I need to find that for you, let me know. But you need to market to, right, the kind of person who needs your solution. You need to know where they find them, and then you actually have to talk to them. I'm sorry. It's not usually a problem for me, as you can tell, But I do understand when my clients are, oh, isn't that interesting? Sorry, that was my alarm. But I want to be able to say to you, if you're uncomfortable, here are some ingredients. First, we talked about where you're going to network. Then we're talking about you, your skills, what you do, being prepared to give an infomercial if you need to, understanding who you're looking for when you're networking. And this is the how to do it. Okay. So remember, this is just the first step. If you are low key because you're a little introverted and you feel uncomfortable, that's okay. You're not trying to close a deal here, so yay. All right. You need to be able to talk about you and your business when asked, briefly and to the point. And you need to, and that you can practice. And you need to be able to be focused on the other person, which is much better if you're introverted because people love it when you're focused on them, right? Everybody has to have a style they're comfortable with. We're not made in the same way, all of us. And one of the things we're feeling very strongly about is please don't not give people the benefit of the doubt if they act a little strained in your first meeting, because not everybody is comfortable. Nervousness is normal. Practicing is a good antidote to that, so you can say things the way you'd like to. But where are you? Are you one of these 4 people? You might be perfectly happy to talk, and that's fine. You probably don't need all that much help. The people who never want to open their mouth in a group, well, that's, a little difficult in a networking situation. But if you can ask them about themselves, that's the first tip I'm going to tell you. Ask them about themselves, get them talking, because when they're talking, you don't have to, except to encourage them or ask some questions. That's usually pretty easy. Then, hey, the spotlight's off you and you're going forward. All right. Where can you find people? And what's more comfortable when you're trying to find them? Here's some suggestions. And this comes from Cinda Simpson, who some of you may know. She has the business Sweet Success at ESS Direct. And believe it or not, for 8 years, she didn't want to leave her office. She had to leave her office and she had to go meet people. So there were some steps that she took in order to meet people in a way that wasn't threatening. One of them was food or refreshment lines. You might want a drink if you're at a networking event in person. Of course, in Zoom, you have to bring your own. But you can talk over food or drink. When people are standing in a line, they're not doing much else. So, hi, I haven't seen you here before. Find some things to say. Being included in a group. One of the things we can see if people are networking physically and they're in a live event, you want to try and be part of the group. So you're looking for a group that's sort of open and will welcome you. One of the things that we did at the Chamber when I was president was we formed an ambassador group. And the role of the ambassadors was to find people like you and make them more comfortable and connect them with people who they would like to talk to. But if you can't do that, think about these things. Think about a wing person. In other words, somebody who will go with you and not stay with you the whole night. That sounds like a nice, safe thing to do. But be that supporter who will be able to go and help you find people to talk to in a comfortable way. Connectors are people like those ambassadors that I said, because they are naturally outgoing. They understand and are fearless about connecting people. They often know the audience in a networking event, and that could be in Zoom or it could be in a live situation. And so they might say, hey, you might like this person. You have a common interest. I'd love it if you'd chat for a few minutes or if you could connect. And then you, as a connector, you kind of step out to find somebody else you can connect. Wallflowers, you might be one of them. Wallflowers are usually terrified. They don't know anybody. And they're in an excruciating, oh, I'm just standing here. I don't know anybody. I feel a little silly. And they might be nervous, but they also feel awkward being a wallflower. So go find the wallflowers. They're probably even more nervous than you. Some people love to help out an event because if their hands are busy, if they're awkward, and yet they're able to help people, they've got a mission, right? So what if you were helping at a registration? What if you were welcoming people as they came in the door? What if you were the person who was facilitating a breakout room in a Zoom call? It's often something I am doing at the chamber. So I'll facilitate the discussion so nobody's standing there or sitting there awkwardly, kind of, now what? That's what you want to avoid. Some people just love even cleaning up. Whatever it is, do the thing that makes you comfortable so you can converse with people while you're busy cleaning, welcoming, or whatever you're doing. Who should you approach? If you're in a live group, that's kind of interesting. Sometimes if you're going to speak and you could hear a good topic going on, then you're welcome to join and give your, make your contribution. If not, if you're trying to get used to this whole thing, you can observe and listen and say that. I don't think I have anything to say right now, but I'm really enjoying this conversation. You'll know to avoid the people whose toes are like this, straight at each other. I can remember being at a networking meeting, several years ago now, and I was having a very quiet conversation with somebody about their family. It was not the kind of thing that you wanted to interrupt, but there was obviously a newbie to this networking thing who saw the two of us, decided she wanted to meet us, and took her hand and thrust it in between us and said, "Look at what Avon's got in new nail polish. It's so cool." And she didn't notice the furrowed lines that meant I was concentrating, the quiet listening mode I was in, the fact that we were facing each other. So that's a signal. If you're in that situation, please don't talk about nail polish because it just creates an issue. If you're standing with your feet or you're standing in an open stance, that's a good sign for an in-person welcoming kind of approach. They're going to listen to you. They're going to let you in because they're not in a tight circle. Wait until there's a lull in the conversation, whether you're online or in person, before you speak. When you do speak up, let's not talk about solving the world's problems immediately, unless, of course, that's a conversation you're joining. Be casual. Make it a relaxed approach. And this, I'll just say quickly now, we have had some divisive opinions about lots of very important things. I don't take a side one way or the other, because when I'm coaching, I want to coach the person. I want the relationship with the person. I would suggest that a networking event, online or in person, is not the time to talk about political or very incendiary kinds of topics. That's not an ideal spot. So you should be listening, right? Practice questions about the other person. As I said, if you can talk to them about what what their business is, what their interests are, you're going to be more appealing to that person and you'll find out more information. So really listen. I've done an exercise in listening. It actually came from marriage counseling, which was an interesting situation. Because if you have people who are kind of cranky with each other, they're not listening. People often don't listen if they're nervous in a networking event either. So you really do need to listen to them. There's a couple of real benefits for that. If they exercise a complaint, if they say, "Oh, I'm so stiff and I just don't know what to do about it," then you can say, "Hey, you know what? I was in that situation. I know a great chiropractor. Did you want me to introduce you?" And that's trying to help them, which is a great thing. If you're not listening to people, people can tell. So are you a little distractible? Yes, I am. So I can't stand and talk to somebody and then have them be in front of a whole room of people with things going on. Just the sheer movement is going to distract my eyes. So I might, or somebody might come in, or somebody might be loud and laughing, and I'm thinking, I wonder what they're doing. I'm not listening. But also, I'm setting myself up to fail. So one of the things you can do is make sure your own distractions are out of the way. So maybe you'll want to turn and face the wall instead. It's silly, I know, but I am definitely distractible, and so that's something I have to watch. Another distraction are phones. And there's a lot of controversy about this. You know, we are often on 24/7 as entrepreneurs. I get that. But if our phones are on and we're answering them instead of talking to somebody or not listening to them, that's a bit touchy. Okay. So now you have to find people. You have to become comfortable and have practices that will make you feel better. Let's move on to your conveying your message. You're building rapport. You're building relationship. You can't build Rome in a day. I know it's not really that saying, but when you are asked about what do you do, it's often an opening line. And honestly, that's not the greatest opening line. So what do you do? But you will get that. And if you get that question, you need to be able to say that sentence that's really simple. I help women who are in corporate jobs that they don't like to learn how to develop a business so they can leave and build the business of their dreams. It sounds a little formal, but you can adapt it. It's a very small message. It isn't 5 minutes of this is what I do, everything that I do, all of it. Don't do that. So what does your product or service do, right? Not the stuff. I know lots of lovely, amazing people. And when asked to explain what they do, well, they go through a whole list. We call them journey people. I've fought hard not to be that journey person because I want to start at the beginning and I want to go to the end. That's not the time because really people don't need to know everything about you. And that's important. So you only have about 30, 45 seconds, maybe, not a whole diatribe. Now, opening lines I mentioned, okay, really, you can depend on the weather, or you probably don't want to get into, we have an election coming up, what do you think? No, don't do that. But you could talk about what they're wearing if you really like it. Here's a really important tip. Be genuine. If you can't say something nice because you don't believe it and you try, what are people going to do? They're going to know that you don't mean it. So don't do that. But you could ask, are you from the Barrie area? I love your scarf. I mentioned Cinda Simpson, one of the things that she used to do because she was tasked by her coach to get over her reluctance to network by starting to meet people because it was important. She became really good at it, by the way. And her coach said, you must go and meet 3 people and exchange business cards, and then we'll talk about it. So she would sometimes say, I've been asked to meet 3 people and you're the second. So, hi, I'm Cinda Simpson. That was blatantly honest, but was a good thing. If you're interested in them and you say to them, I'd love to find out about your business. That's kind of a cool way to do it. Remember, you're not closing a deal. Maybe you meet somebody you'll want to have a coffee meeting with or a Zoom meeting with. So you can say, hey, listen, that sounds really great. I wonder, do you have some time for a meeting, half an hour or an hour? I'd love to talk about your business. I'd like to learn more. That's starting to build rapport. And then active listening, I mentioned that just in passing. So what active listening means is you're actually not waiting to talk. Do you know people who they pause while you're talking? They haven't heard you. Now it's their turn. That's not active listening. In that marriage counseling situation, it becomes a need to listen so clearly that you can repeat back to the other person what they have just said. And if you can't do that, if you're gapping out, you're looking at your phone or you're doing whatever, that is not active listening. And I mentioned the complaints because that could be a nice suggestion you could make for somebody. What do they need? Is there something that you could help them with? Hey, I know somebody who works in a very similar environment, but you might be able to collaborate together. Can I introduce you? I do that a lot. It's part of my approach because I think people need to be connected. So trying to help is a good thing to do. There are some networking faux pas. Selling is one. Thrusting a business card in their face is another. Not listening is another. right? Be sensitive. I think that's a really good idea. Dominating the conversation is a definite faux pas. It might help to have name tags where it's appropriate, because then people see your name. That's a good thing, and you need to call them by their name. It's a good technique. There are some other things, but there's social graces, and you know about social graces. So you've been conveying your message. Now it's time to move on. You may feel that you want to meet an interesting person and then stay with them for the whole event. It's comforting, but it doesn't help you with networking. You need to have a few numbers. So you have to figure out how to gracefully move on. One of the brilliant things about breakout rooms in online events is that you move on after 7 or 8 minutes of being in the breakout room, so you don't have to worry about it. But if we are going back to in-person events, you need to gracefully move out of the range of that person so that they can they can go on to somebody else, and so can you. So how do you do that? That takes a little bit of figuring out, but you can have some transition lines, some things like, I promised I was going to meet a couple more people, and I think I'd love this. I'd love to meet you later. I wonder if we can exchange cards and see if you can move on. But you sometimes have what's called Klingons, and that's a Star Trek. Yes, that is a Star Trek term. But if you don't want to follow up, don't offer to meet them. That's one rule. Establish how you're going to do it. If you think this would be a great person to listen, I'd love to get into this in a little more depth. Why don't we connect? If you are moving to another group, always thank them. Listen, it was great to talk to you. I really enjoyed learning about your business. And I've taken up enough of your time. So I'll, I'm just going to speak to one of the people I promised to talk to tonight. Not a bad one. Sometimes when you, as women, we go to the ladies' room often in a group. I know. I don't know if we do it as much anymore because of the pandemic. That's an interesting question. But sometimes you can't, if you're talking to another person, you can't always shake them by saying, I'm just going to go get a snack or a drink. I'm going to head to the ladies' room. Klingons are the hardest. The people who are sticking with you, maybe they're uncomfortable. So one of the things you can do is you can introduce them to somebody else. Hey, I'd love you to meet this person, Alfred, because I think you have some things in common. So Alfred, meet Mary. Mary, meet Alfred. I'm just going to go and grab a drink. Enjoy. Now, that can be a little awkward, but you'll practice some lines. That's what I would suggest. And after you move on, you've left the event, you need to follow up. If you don't follow up, it's a waste of time and money. And I think everyone understands this, but then we get busy, right? This is the hardest step of networking, believe it or not. What happens if you don't follow up? You're wasting your time, you're wasting your money. When should you follow up? Usually, if you don't want to be so keen, unless you've fallen in love with them, perhaps, you could wait 24 hours. You could wait 48 hours. But my personal preference is not too much longer than 72, maybe 96. So 3 or 4 days, don't let it go through. We used to say a week. Things move faster now. People may forget. One of the things that you can do is put your information of the people that you've contacted and in a to-do list into your CRM. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it is customer relationship management. It is a tool. It can be as simple as a Word document, although you can't sort things. Could be an Excel document, better. It could be a database. Whatever you do, keep track of the people so you don't just meet them and then they fall through the cracks. It is the number one thing I hear from when people don't follow up. Some people divide their cards into the A-listers and the B-listers. Sounds a little crass, but the people you really want to make sure to connect with, put them at the top of the list, right? Now, perhaps you're in a B2B relationship and you run across gatekeepers. You know, they are the people that you try and connect with a phone call to say, hey, I love talking. I'd like to get together. Sometimes they intercept emails. Sometimes you have a receptionist. It's their job to make sure their people aren't getting hounded, but they don't know whether you and the person that you're trying to reach have reached a rapport. So there are a couple of things that I've done, and one is to call before business opens to leave a message. That way, sometimes if you're lucky, the email system or the phone system will allow you to find out what the extension is, so you can sometimes bypass a gatekeeper. Sometimes you just have to sweet talk gatekeepers in a B2B relationship. Just remember that. It can be a very helpful thing. They're trying to do their job as well. The final outcome you want is a relationship. It does take time to grow the relationship. And you do need to get to know them to find out if they're going to be a really great client or a gateway to a client. When you've developed a relationship with a business owner, you can be helpful to them. That's how you build rapport. Now, one thing, just because you've got somebody's business card, do not put them on your email list without asking. I've run across this in the past, and I make it very clear to people, it's my choice if I want to be on an email list or not. It's kind of rude. Not only that, privacy laws are about to change. I know we've been expecting it for a little while, but as things calm down, we are going to have different privacy laws, and they're going to be tighter. Okay, I want to talk briefly about collaboration. I think I've got a few minutes left. And that's an important thing because it's a little bit different. Now, you can try and contact clients directly. That's a good thing to do. It really does allow you to confirm that you're on the right track with your target market, your ideal client, because when you can talk to people and find out what their needs are, you're adjusting your client profile as you go along, because you may find out what you think is right, even what's on Google that people are really asking for, isn't necessarily matched up to the kinds of people you're meeting. And those were some of the questions earlier on we asked. But if you look for a business that serves the same ideal client that you do, and that maybe they have a product or service that precedes yours or complements yours or is following you, I'll give you an example. You can perhaps use each other's businesses to help promote the other. Collaboration is going to be so huge because we've all been a little restricted, a little isolated. So I'll give you an example. So for Ask for Directions training, I focus on early stage entrepreneurs. That's my sweet spot. We get them set up, then we get their business growing. But after 3 to 5 years, somewhere in there, depending on what's going on in their lives and their business, they're going to need somebody to help them scale. So I might be looking for a leadership coach or somebody who's scaling their business, who is good with that. Let's get your business out there around the world. Before, I might talk to leadership coaches who are serving my ideal market. So if we are collaborating, then we can help each other with our email list, grow our influence, and have a progression that we can serve our clients with. It is a low-cost potentially low-cost endeavor, but it's really helpful to be able to focus on the same kinds of clients. And you can find them through Google or social. You can find them through ads. I'm really trying to evaluate the value of social ads right at the moment because of the algorithm change with social, particularly Facebook. It's a little all over the place. But again, the same principles apply. Find where those people are. And if you meet somebody who does what you do, or similarly, we don't always do the same things as our competitors. Instead of closing off and ignoring them, find out about them, because there's two things. One, they could be part of that continuum of serving the same client. Or what happens if, as a solopreneur, you become ill and you need to have somebody to refer to? It's always a good idea to know who's in your field and who you can refer to. And again, you can look at all of the other, all the other places that you're going to find people, the same events, the same kinds of things that you might from a B2B perspective. And you can look at that. That is just about the end of what I was going to say. So I wonder if there are any questions or anything else that you want to dive deeper into. That was a lot. I recognize that was a lot.
That was amazing, Patricia. Truly, thank you very much for that. I mean, it's, when we talk about networking, I think immediately your mind springs to a certain scenario, a certain, you end up with that picture in your mind. But the way you took that to much, much deeper levels, in terms of building a relationship and where to find those, the people that you should be networking with was really interesting. And kudos to you for getting a Star Trek reference in there.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I know.
I think that may be, in the 4 or 5 years we've been running the Learning Labs, that may be the first Star Trek reference. So good for you. That's great. I mean, I wrote, a ton of notes here, and one of the things that, in my years as being at the Small Business Center, being in business prior to that, it would never ever occurred to me. Just a small point you made right at the beginning was about, looking at some of those online forums and trying to discern what are people's pain points, what are people complaining about online. And it's so true. We love to complain online, right? So,
yes, we do.
Looking at some of those things and kind of gleaning what some of those pain points I thought was a really, really interesting point.
Can I give you an example that I use? And it's true. It's a true example, doing Google search, because people go to Google too. How do you is, I think, the biggest question beginner. But one of so I'm looking around to make lead magnets. That's a whole other discussion. Although if somebody's curious, we can certainly talk about that. One of my lead magnets is about the cost of starting a business. So I went to Google and started typing in trial questions. How much does it cost to start a business? Who can you go to start businesses? All kinds of questions. Turns out, how much does it cost to start a business? Received 11 billion hits pre-pandemic. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a really good number. There's a lot of people who are curious about that. In the pandemic, when everybody got a little distracted, there were not necessarily immediately startups going through. It only became 2.4 billion. Hey, only. So I've got a lead magnet that is, how much does it really cost to start a business? And I've put some sample costs and budgets and things because I've done this for a long time. And yes, things will change. And I actually have to update that because of the price rises. But that's an example of how Google can be your friend. We don't like to upset Google, right?
Indeed. No, that's another great point. And folks, if you have questions, please feel free to prop them in the chat box or in the Q&A, and we'll present them to Patricia. Or if something occurs to you after the call and you have further questions, we can certainly get those over to Patricia and get them answered for you. The other thing that you talked about that I thought, wow, it's really, really insightful, was just putting yourself in a position where you're comfortable. A lot of folks are just not comfortable about approaching someone, particularly now, sort of, if I can use the word post-pandemic. I know we're not really, but one little hope. Where I'm sure, well, does somebody, is this person even going to be comfortable with me coming up to them? Do I shake their hand? Or, what do we do? Are we fist bumping here? And so I thought it was really insightful that you said, like, put yourself in a position where you're comfortable. Maybe you're comfortable, cleaning up a few things from the table. Maybe you're getting the lunch line or the coffee line, and that's where you're more, more sort of, it feels more organic, and you can chat more. So, as opposed to that, just marching right up to someone and saying, hey, nice to meet you. So, which is not for everyone. Well,
thank heavens, because honestly, I think we're all human. We may be out of practice with this from a live event perspective, let's face it. And one of the things I didn't talk about was the etiquette. Then you're aware that my husband is ill, so I'm very careful, and I'll be going out with a mask. I absolutely make it a policy not to comment not to decide, not to judge about anything. So I think we need to be not the word tolerant. I think we need to accept that people will have different zones of comfort. I think that's
Mhm.
a great point that you raised. And so if you're in person, then if somebody is backing away, we attended a funeral of a very close friend, unfortunately, a little while ago. And one of the things that was a little disturbing was that before the mask mandate came off, nobody was wearing masks except for maybe 3 people. So we had to decide how to make ourselves safe. And you're going to run across this, right? So no judgment. Make sure you're comfortable. But one of the things that I see as the mentor is, why are you choosing a business that you think maybe think it's going to make money? And okay, that's a good thing. But if you don't like what you're doing, it shows.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really a good idea to say, to like what you do. You don't have to necessarily love it, but you better like most of it.
You better like it. That's right. We do actually have a question here from Gerald, and he's mentioned, obviously, you touched on introverts when
Yes.
networking. Any recommendations for extroverts when networking?
I once was speaking in a group, and somebody said something nice to me, and my daughter gave me 8 pages of notes. Thank you, honey, on what I should be doing. But one of the things she said was, when somebody says something nice to you, say thank you and then do this.
Mm.
Extroverts have to dial it down a little. I know this about myself. I can be, I just have to read what's going on in the room and understand that you may be nervous and want to dominate the conversation. That's a tough one for people to listen to. And if you notice that their eyes are glazing over and their thoughts are wandering, or they're going, they have to go and get a drink suddenly, maybe you need to just dial it back a little. I think we all need to listen louder, frankly. If we can listen to what's going on and react accordingly. This is a dance. It's a
Right.
bit of a dance, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps, or Gerald, if you've got something specific, but as an extrovert, sorry, I love one-liners and I can make people laugh at times. Then I have to do this
Mhm.
because it's about the other person.
Quite. Somebody once said to me, we were talking similar things, but networking and that, and they're sort of, general rule to themselves is ask themselves, are you listening or are you just waiting to speak? Because
Well,
so
waiting to
often we are
speak.
just waiting to speak, right? But
Oh,
when we
oh,
should be
oh,
listening. Right.
oh, right. Sorry, I
Exactly.
didn't mean to do that. But yeah.
No, perfectly illustrated. So we do have a couple more minutes for questions, folks. I just want to, while we wait and see if there are any, just remind you that Modupe did put some comments in the chat at the beginning of the
Oh, cool.
presentation with some resources available from the public library. So I can't stress enough what a great resource the public library is for local
Absolutely.
businesses. Tons and tons of great things there. So please do check them out. Our next learning lab is actually going to be a 90-minute learning lab. So a little departure from our usual 60-minute format. But on Wednesday, June 22nd from 10 a.m. to 11:30, we're going to be discussing products and pricing, building your product portfolio and pricing strategies. As I'm sure you find, Patricia, through your groups, one of the most common questions that we get asked at the Small Business Center is, how do I price my products? So we have a 90-minute, this one's gonna be a bit more of a workshop than necessarily our typical, our typical format. So really hope that everyone can join us for that. And that again is on Wednesday, June 22nd at 10 a.m. And it looks like we have a question here. Oh, it's just a nice comment.
Thank
Just
you.
want to thank you both. Can I put you both on my email list? Thanks for that.
Who are you?
This
You know
is
what?
from
Sorry, go ahead.
Dorothy Wintle Saunders.
Oh, that's really funny. Sure, but you know what? I'd love for you to reach out and connect. My information is, I guess the slides are going out, so my information is there. I am absolutely happy to connect. As Dave pointed out, I'm a mentor for the Small Business Center, and that's because I really enjoy what I do. But I have to tell you, I've more than once told people to raise their prices. There's a thing about price raising that's,
Yeah.
really enervating. And the other comment I would quickly make is the Barrie Library is really an amazing resource. I think you're absolutely right. There are so many things. If you're writing a business plan, there are business plan models that you can go to in classes, you know, apart from the ones that you run. So, you know, you need to not forget about the library, and there's some really great librarians there, business librarians.
I 100% agree. Thank you.
Mm.
We do have, I know we're a little over time. If I can just trouble you for a minute more of your time, Patricia,
Sure.
we do have one more question in here from Beth. And it's just, is it okay to request a connection with ideal clients on LinkedIn?
Oh, yes, totally. Do you know, like I said, I talked to somebody in New Zealand 2 nights ago. It was a wonderful conversation. We'll probably collaborate together. One thing I don't like, and it's a personal preference, I think, but when somebody asks for a connection and then they try to sell you something, not cool. So be careful about the follow-up DMs, I think. It was a great organization. I thought was interesting, but I was trying to connect with the person. And I said, I wonder if you feel like a Zoom call. And she said, sure, and sent me her salesperson's link. It's like, wait. So there's etiquette.
That wasn't the deal.
I kind of said I wanted to have more of a personal connection. And her reply was, so what do you want to know? It's like, no, not over LinkedIn chat. But yeah, just make sure you're on the same page. That's all.
Indeed. That's great. Patricia, thank you for allowing us to put extra your time. Thank you for a wonderful presentation today. Really appreciate it. Modupe, any final words from yourself?
I just want to thank Patricia. That was a very informative session. Thank you so much. You made it so simple and easy to understand. And thank you for talking about 211 because we have it at the library as well.
I know.
Thank you for promoting the library too.
It's a good resource.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks again, Patricia. Thank you, Modupe, for the wonderful partnership. We appreciate it. As mentioned, this session is being recorded, so you will be hearing from us shortly with a link to our YouTube video. And we look forward to seeing you all back with our next Learning Lab on June 22nd. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.